Do you find yourself in the wrong relationship? Today, we're talking about how to effectively break up with someone in the most respectful and ethical manner. Stick around, I'm going to go into it in quite a bit of detail here. First things first, guys, you have to be as honest and transparent with the person as you can. A lot of times the other person needs closure, needs to understand. And if you just ghost them, they'll never get that closure, no matter how much you think that you're being kinder by not telling them the truth. It's more often than not worse when you're not honest with them. Okay? If you're not honest with them, or if you just leave them ghosted, they can never improve who they are as a person. They can never figure out what was wrong with them. It leaves such a void, such a hole within their hearts. The best way of doing this is the first thing that I want to talk about. And that's figure out why and really pinpoint why you're not happy in the relationship and why you want to end the relationship, okay? These things include, but are not limited to, financial issues, sexual issues, family issues, spiritual issues, religious issues. There's so many different deal breakers out there. There are some that are controllable and some that are not controllable. One, for example, can be a disability. If somebody has a disability that is just insurmountable for yourself, that doesn't mean you have to take on a lifelong load of caring for someone that you barely know. Okay? Nobody is requiring that from you. So these things are sensitive topics, sensitive matters, but they're valid. If you are leaving for something like that, then you need to be open and honest with them. If anything, it'll give them such closure. It'll let them even potentially hate you. And that might be a good way for them to get over it. You're not going to be everyone's hero. There's a great quote: no matter how good you are, you're always going to end up being somebody's villain. That doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes situations that, always end up having a person that ends up being hurt. And in a relationship, we want to try to mitigate that hurt. And then one of the best ways is just being open and honest, pinpoint the issue, and explain to the person what the issue is and why it's a deal breaker. Now, oftentimes they try to come back with you saying they're going to change, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. That's an issue that you need to figure out whether or not you're willing to give those chances, or maybe you already have given those chances and things aren't changing. So then you need to reiterate that these are the issues and this is why I'm leaving. The next one is, when you're giving that information, you need to be firm but gentle. If you've already made the decision, then backtracking on it is not healthy for a relationship in the long term. So you need to be firm in your decision-making process. Once that decision's been made, you cannot go back on it. And almost, I would say, no matter what, because you're already at that place where you're saying, I can't do this any longer. So it's just best that it's over. So you just need to move on. Now, when I say you need to be gentle, there's no reason to be mean or rude when you're breaking up with someone. Honesty does not equal mean. Honesty just means honest, but there's a way of delivering information that is good and that is bad. You can tell somebody that they are bad in bed by saying, we're not compatible in the bedroom. And if they press you, then you can say, look, you're not as good in that department for these reasons. This is what I need and this is what you're not giving to me. And that is absolutely valid. And if they can't set their ego aside to take on that constructive criticism, that's on them, that's not on you. The next thing is give them closure. Allow them the opportunity to ask questions. Now, don't let them dive deep into a million questions or allow them to ask questions that are demeaning or are trying to elicit a reaction. Don't allow for that. But genuine questions you should try to answer. There's no reason why you should lie to them at this point. If the relationship is over, maintain that integrity in yourself and give them the proper answers, because they're struggling to figure out what's going on and why it's happening to them, quote unquote. So they need that reassurance to be able to ask questions in a safe manner. In the long run, it'll be good for you. It'll be cathartic to get the information out, and it'll be good for them. It'll be cathartic because they will actually get feedback that they could potentially grow and not make the same mistakes in the future. Questions to avoid answering. Broad questions like, what could I have done differently? Is there somebody else? Now, if there is, you should be upfront and say that. If there isn't, you should be upfront and say that. Going into detail about who it was or who it wasn't or whatnot is probably not the best thing to do. But at the end of the day, we all know which questions we should answer and which questions we shouldn't answer. But don't feel that you need to protect somebody's feelings when you break up with them entirely. And you can judge yourself which questions are answerable and which aren't. When you don't want to answer a specific question, it's important to let them be aware of why you're not willing to answer that question. Don't give a nonsensical reason. You need to dig deep into yourself and figure out why you're not willing to answer that question. There's gotta be a why. And when you can articulate the why, they can understand the why, and whether they accept it or not is not on you. And it's not your responsibility for them to accept the why. This is why ending a relationship, breaking up, is not so easy. Especially to do it as painless and gently as possible, where it's not filled with drama, it's not filled with violence or potential violence or resentment or anything like that. You need to take these steps seriously. You need to do some deep thinking, and you need to have a clear path. This is what I'm trying to show you. The next thing is you need to cut contact entirely. No exceptions, unless there are legal issues, rent, kids, so on and so forth. But if possible, do a clean break with no further communication with the other person. If there's any future communication, it just almost like opens a door for them possibly getting back together with you. It gives them hope when there is none. Especially if you're at this point where it's like it's done, and you don't want to give them any hope anymore, then you definitely want to cut all contact. I think that's an important step, and it's also important for them to know that. You can tell them gently, listen, I'm not interested in this relationship anymore, and I'm going to be cutting full contact with you. I hope you appreciate my desire in doing so, and I want to be forthright with you and tell you exactly why I'm cutting this contact so severely. Here's where things get dicey and tricky. You know your partner. If there is any chance of false allegations, of violence, of threats, of fraud, of Lord knows whatever that is beyond the regular, crying and potentially begging or anger, beyond the average stuff, you might want to do some audio, video recording, or have a witness present. If there's any semblance or possibility of violence, threats, or suicide, maybe police need to be involved as well. Maybe at least on standby, or have somebody there that can mitigate the outburst. You know who you're dating. You know what kind of potential they have. If there's any inkling of that extreme, then authorities need to be involved. Gentlemen, a lot of ladies sometimes go scorched earth when they feel like they've been slighted. Even if you're trying to do a gentle breakup, it would behoove you to possibly at least do an audio recording secretly in case there is any allegations of abuse, physical or otherwise, and that could protect you in the long run. Cops and courts are not kind to men with these types of allegations. So protect yourself. I know it's hard to think that the person that you've been dating, you think you would never do this, but it's always a possibility. And if you even have the slightest inkling that they are capable of this, then you need to protect yourself first and foremost. Lastly, it's important that if you follow these steps, be clear with the person, be as honest, be as gentle as you can, and you have tried to do your best to not hurt their feelings, even though that you will, because these things happen. It is important for you to understand one very important fact, one significant fact. Anything that happens once you cut contact to them is not your fault. If a suicide occurs, if self-harm occurs, if you follow these steps and just be as kind about this awful situation as you can, then it's not your fault and you can't blame yourself. People have their own lives to live. People have their own responsibilities to bear. It might be a good idea to seek therapy just to heed any kind of future feelings of depression, guilt, and sadness that may linger if something like that does occur. It's an awful situation if it occurs, and we try to mitigate these things as best as we can by including professional help, potentially a social worker, a grief counselor, all sorts of resources out there to mitigate any kind of suicidal tendencies or anything like that. This has been a more somber episode. With that being said, that'll be it for this episode. Hopefully you stick around for another one. Click one of the ones in the suggestion bar. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Well, that's it for this episode, guys. Hit that like, share, and subscribe button, and leave your comments below. Until the next time, cheers.